Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this webinar, Threat Hunting at Scale, Finding Evil Across Your Enterprise. Before I turn it over to Mike to begin the presentation, I just want to cover a few housekeeping items. First thing, we will be recording today's session, and it'll be made available on carbonblack.com in the resources section. The next thing I want to cover is if you do have any questions throughout the presentation, you can submit them through the questions panel and submitting that question to all panelists. And with that, I want to turn over to Mike to begin his presentation.
Excellent. Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. My name is Michael Haag. I'm the Director of Advanced Threat Detection and Research here at Red Canary. Red Canary, just a quick blurb about what Red Canary does, is we are Carbon Black's first and leading managed EDR partner. We're also recognized by Gartner in the EDR Tech and MDR solution. We help customers of all sizes defend their endpoints, so anything from 70,000 to 100 endpoints, right, or even 50. My past experience, I built out a security organization at a Fortune 150. We came into the organization with just a couple tools here and there, and we needed to begin to find evil across our organization. Carbon Black Response was one of the tools that we utilized to find all the bad things out there. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, it's m_Haggis. If you needed some entertainment, you may not want to Google that right now. Haggis, that is. So quick objectives, what we're going to go over here today. First, we're going to lay the groundwork. We're going to talk about what threat hunting is. We're going to look at the maturity models that are out there and a little bit about how Red Canary does this. Then we're going to jump right into some practical how to use some tools to begin exploring your data. Data analysis is probably one of the most interesting things you can do with Carbon Black's information. So talk about that, and then at the end we're going to talk about scaling it up to looking for more information, getting more information out of Carbon Black, and how to find more evil things that way. All right, hopping right into the threat hunting maturity models here. Hey, you may or may not have noticed these these images are exactly the same. Squirrel actually sponsored the SANS document that this was published in, but they have two different graphics and they're great. So in this particular case, if you haven't seen this before, these are great ways if you need to operationalize threat hunting. And most everyone is getting to a place where they are getting beyond just standard correlation rules in their organization. So if you have a SIM or anything like that, right, that's going to be a part of this. So initially, when you get going on one of these models here, in the beginning, we all start with doing either ad hoc queries or bringing information in, and we really don't know what to do with this volume of data. We hear that a lot from Carbon Black customers, EDR customers in general. Like, there's so much information. And then over time, as you begin to mature your program, let's say you're using a SIM and you're able to pull in an Intel feed. That Intel feed begins to provide you IPs, domains, or MD5s. Now you're correlating things. You might get some tip-offs based off this intelligence to go and investigate something of interest happening on a finance machine, right? Or in Carbon Black Response world, you might begin building out your watch list more and getting better and more high fidelity watch lists, and you're generating feeds of Intel for Carbon Black. And then down the line here, you start getting more procedural. You're getting things that are more and more better within your environment. You're detecting things quickly. You're analyzing them very fast because you have high fidelity indicators. You have high fidelity alerts generating in your environment. And a good friend of ours is Roberto Rodriguez on Twitter. His Twitter handle's @CyberWarDog with a 3 for the E and a 0 for the O on dog. He talks about taking this volume of information and mapping it to the MITRE attack framework, right? So you're able to get to a place and you start to score yourself, and I'm leading up to the last box here, and you start to score yourself on how mature you've become. And one of the last items he has is you're starting to use either basic or more advanced machine learning algorithms to begin to pull out outliers and other interesting behaviors in your environment. So this is a really awesome way to see how things happen and begin maturing this. If you're an MSSP, you probably have something very similar to this, or an MSP, and you're beginning to follow these same kind of models and building out SOPs and how you're hunting or how you're letting analysts go off the grid and find other things. So here at Red Canary, it's almost very similar. In our particular case, we're using that carbon black response data. We collect all that endpoint information. We're mapping it to the MITRE attack matrix. We're looking for what's happening on the endpoint. What are things looking like on endpoints? If it's a new threat report, new public posting of something or some other type of intelligence that's flowing out there on Twitter, whatever it may be, the analysts will begin to hunt for these things across our customers. And fortunately, with Carbon Black Response, we're able to go back in time in X amount of days, right, to at least look for some potential behaviors that may have happened. If you're dropping in this into your SIM, same thing. If you're keeping a good amount of retention, you're able to go back in time within there, find something that's of interest, some new intelligence, IP, domain, behavior, go back in time on that behavior, find out what it is. So in our case, again, moving on here, we start to build out detectors for these behaviors. A very basic one, right? Looking at WinWord spawning shells or any Office product spawning a shell. So the analysts begin to codify that, build it out, put it in production, and begin to look for suspicious behaviors happening. And then this is part of the maturity here is suppression-based analysis and taking a lot of noise and suppressing it so that your detector becomes more higher fidelity as you begin to generate these alerts and they come to show to analysts in their review and triage. I recently wrote a blog post on Carbon Black Response in Splunk and a little bit about how I do data analysis within Splunk. And so in this particular case, on the right-hand side, excuse me, the right-hand side is the scientific model. Threat hunting is very much similar to that. On the left is the one I've generated. Generally, in my experience, you're doing some very broad searches. You're trying to understand what's normal, what's not normal on an endpoint. You might be looking across everything, like show me all processes and command line data for all my endpoints, and then maybe break down a couple machines at a time, start to suppress some obvious good things, start to tune this. Eventually you get it to a place where it's generating a minimal amount of alerts to where it's semi-high fidelity. And then you investigate those and you determine if those are good or bad and you keep tuning it, right? Scientific model on the right, same thing. Question we had this morning, we were talking about this, was how do you find something that is not known right now? So Casey Smith hasn't tweeted it out, or it's not on Twitter yet, it's not the hot thing, right? How do you go about hunting for those types of behaviors in your environment? It all just begins with asking that question and beginning to go and look at your endpoints. You start to look at what's normal on my endpoints, what processes are standard, what command line are they executing and running. The bigger thing is, holistically, what other endpoints are running, this new process or this interesting process that you found on one box. Is everybody running this? Is this a standard Windows process or a Linux process? You can Google it, right? Start looking at things, maybe find some TechNet articles. Maybe there's something interesting about it. I'm really thinking about RedSurf 32 right now when Casey found the squiggly do one. So you begin to question it, build out your detectors, and over time you start to tune it. You might have a couple applications that perform some behavior that will trigger an alert, and that's your false positive, right? So over time, it's going to get noisy. Not everything's perfect, forever. I remember we would generate, it's just like intelligence, right? You pull an IP domain feed in, those IPs for bad things change, the domains go down, or new ones are always getting popped up. So it's constantly carrying and feeding for whatever you're doing, however you're performing data analysis. And that's why it's a cycle, right? So when I took over this security organization, we started building things out. This very much takes time to get to a place where you have everything operationalized. In the beginning, like I mentioned, you will be very much doing everything very ad hoc. You might be at a place today where you're still accessing your firewall directly and looking at the alerts coming off of a Palo Alto, for instance, whatever it may be. You might be looking at these alerts and there's got to be a better way. You got 10 products. let's get everything central somehow, or automated somehow. You want to bring some alignment, right? And as you get to becoming more mature in your security program, you start to come to a place where everything's starting to work together now. And so in our particular case, we operationalize everything in Splunk. And so we said, one day we just sat down and said, we cannot work out of 10 consoles anymore. It has to be in one place, and we chose Splunk. So we ended up building everything out of Splunk. All our data was there, we had everything, and so we began to automate and perform our orchestration straight from Splunk, which you can follow along on our Red Canary blog series for my Splunk series, the 2 parts there. So yeah, first, I hope that was very interesting, and it was kind of quick. I really wanted to get to the cool, fun stuff here. So lab 1, we're going to break right into baselining. And in particular, we do this at Red Canary because we want to understand what's normal in a customer's organization, in their environment. What's normal? What's executing? You have a lot of logon script activity. You know, there's a lot of PowerShell encoded commands happening. Is there a really good Power admin who uses encoded commands to manage everything, right? How much noise will he generate? So hopping into baselining here, I'm going to bring up my lab. Perfect. We'll see how the demos go today. All right. So in this case, a couple tools we're going to be using. You can pick these up on the Carbon Black GitHub repository, and you can also pick up the rest of them, and I'll call these out as we get going. The rest of them on the Red Canary Co. GitHub repository as well. This particular tool we're going to start with first is called CD Response Surveyor. And now Surveyor is a tool that, like I mentioned, we use for baselining organizations. By its very nature, running it will use, if you have your API environment all set up, pip install CB API, Surveyor will go through a bunch of definition files, and I'll bring one up here in a second. Definition file is literally just a list of processes that you want to look for. You can either codify it to be processes, command line, pretty much every variable that you can think of within Carbon Black, you could add it into your definition file. So let me just jump into that definitions directory here, just so you can all see what these look like. So I'm just going to clear screen, make it look a little cleaner here. So in this case, all of these come default with Surveyor, and I'm just going to open up, let's just open up the sysinternals one, if I can spell it. So as this is opening up, what I ended up doing was I went through all the sysinternals utilities from Microsoft, got every one of their process names, and I added them to our definition file here. And literally it's just JSON, right? So here's your process name, pipelist.exe. And as I mentioned, you can use everything from Carbon Black because it's just going to query against the API. And so in some instances, you might have a bad actor bring in their own PS exec. It could be renamed ps.exe. And so we want to look for that internal name. So I added internal name to a couple of the core ones here because I want to know if that's in a customer's environment or an environment that I'm scanning. So as you can kind of see, it kind of goes on. It's a very long definition file. System utils, same thing. We're looking for, you know, at execution, any kind of scheduled tasks, any of these types of processes executing an environment. And what it leads to is when you execute Surveyor here, and I'll just run a quick one so everybody can see it. Oh, wrong directory. All right, so I'll rerun this. And since it's already ready to go for my demo, I don't have to do profile. I'll just do help real quick so everybody sees that again. So generally you do profile if you have multiple instances. In this case, I just have my default set up ready to go. And what I'm going to say is I'm going to tell it to go for definitions directory, defdir. I'm going to tell it that Surveyor definition directory. It's called definitions. And then after that, you can add a prefix. So you can say, you know, today's date, whatever you like it to be, and this will be prefixed to the beginning of that file. And then you can also tell it how many days you want this to run. If you begin to build out more and more definition files, it can take a very long time to run. And so as you can see, it's running through all these real quick. Our demo environment is quite small, but it's looking for all these types of processes executing in an environment. And what it ends up dumping here, I'm just going to open one up, is you'll get a CSV file, survey CSV. Being I'm on an Ubuntu box, I don't have the ability to generate really nice, pretty pivot tables, but you can get the idea of how you can manipulate this in Excel. So in this particular case, you got your endpoint name, we got our username, we see the process path that's executing. We also have that command line data, which is the rich area of the item you want to really focus at here. And then also on the far right, a couple other items here. We got our source. So this is the program within that definition file. So this is our scripting definition file, and this is what it was looking for as it scanned the environment over the API. So as you can see, there's some really interesting things because demo is always having interesting things happen in there. This maybe-evil.bat file is of interest to me, right? And this is where you have the ability to go right into Carbon Black, analyze what was happening, what processes respond from it. And this is how we handle when we get a new organization. We're looking for really interesting behaviors like this. I want to know every scheduled task is executing, who's running WMIC and why, you know, people enumerating accounts or the domain, whatever it may be. It's all really interesting behaviors happening here. That's how I use Surveyor. I'll open it up real quick for any questions. If anybody has any questions about it, again, you can pick up CB Response Surveyor on the redcanary.co GitHub page.
Hey, Mike, we had a question come in from Brian. Do these tools require Python 2 or 3 to use?
We just converted, no, so CB Response Surveyor is still Python 2 today. Yep, good question.
That is the only one I'm seeing come in for this one.
Cool. Something we're also working on for our definition files is we're trying to get more Linux and Mac processes built in there. I have some stuff built out today, but as you can probably imagine, looking for people modifying files and whatnot, it can get very noisy in a CSV. But looking for more specific things and definitely trying to tune them for that. And we'll definitely release those once we get there. All right, let's hop into lab 2 here. So lab 2, we're gonna focus on looking at more data. We're gonna take some noisy information and we're gonna start building out some watch lists, and I will show you how we built that and how we handled this at scale. We had 3 Carbon Black clusters. We had 2 in the US, and then we had another in Europe. So we had 70,000 endpoints sprawled across all 3 of those. There has to be a better way to push out all of our queries, our watch list. And so we ended up generating a tool called Query Feed Generator, which is on the community repository on Carbon Black's GitHub. Another thing we did is we wanted to just attach some additional feeds to Carbon Black. So I'm going to use a utility, which I'll post out later here. It's called Forager. It's actually on the Dev Relations page. Forager is a utility that we can use to pull down some intel, generate a feed, and push it out to our Carbon Black servers. And then from there, I'm going to show some other utilities which are written in Python 3, and those ones are on the Red Canary repository. So actually, I'll just keep that in full screen, and we'll flip to the VM here. All right, so I'm going to get out of this guy. So first, let's go ahead and check out the Query Feed Generator. So again, this is under, I'll give you guys a quick view here. Community repo is on the Carbon Black GitHub page. In this particular case, I'm going to go right into CB, then I'm going to go into the Alliance feed examples. And in here is what we have, the Query Feed Generator. So a couple things about this, and it's actually super cool. We didn't want to have to manage, it's a little bit different in Carbon Black 6 today, but we didn't want to have to manage all of our queries or all of our watch list cluster by cluster, because I might be tuning something on cluster 1 and it might not get that change on cluster 2. So what we ended up changing here, and this is really neat, I think you guys will like this. We created a CSV file, and inside the CSV file is queries.csv, is the ability to go ahead and add in all of your new queries. So literally, kind of at the top of the title here, if you open this up, and actually that's a good idea. Let's go ahead and open that up. Yep, queries. Just so it looks a little bit more cleaner. So titles on the top, give your watch list a name, tell it what you want to look for, so it's going to be events, and you can add a link to it and give it a score, and you can then drop in your queries. This is how we began to really tune our watch list across a lot of environments. At one point, I think we had like 70 CV queries in here. We had to break them out because they're all running at once every couple minutes and begin to kill things if you have really loose ones. So you can, like I mentioned, just give it some names and you can copy links. So in this case, we're copying them straight from the Carbon Black community at the time. This is 100% because really what I'm going to look for is, I don't know, let's look for scheduled tasks. That's it. I'm just going to save it. Sure. So that's it. It's one of the fastest ways you can get a lot of watch lists out to a lot of your environments. It's a really powerful tool, and I don't think a whole lot of people know about it, but it's very nice to have around. So you want to use it. You want to generate this feed. I'm just going to run help so everybody can see the help here. So generate query feed help. It's literally saying, here's the CSV with all your queries in there. And you want to go ahead and output it to queryfeed.txt, and I will just open that up, the queryfeed.txt, so you can see what it looks like. There it is. So it will generate the feed, and at this point, you have the feed file. You have the feed. All your watch lists are built right into it, ready to go. Get pushed right out to your Carbon Black server. Obviously, there's a couple ways you can do this, right? You can move this file to your Carbon Black response server, attach the feed that locally, which wouldn't really be helpful if you're continuously updating this and tuning it with your queries.csv file. So what you could end up doing is set up a feed server. And so with the feed server, what you'll end up generating, very simply, you could even just run it right here if you like. With Python, you could just do a simple HTTP server, and it's going to do this whole directory because I didn't specify exactly. Then you can open your browser to port 8080 localhost, or if you have it on a server that's central to Carbon Black in your environment, you could then attach that feed server right to all of your boxes, and then you can right to your clusters, which makes it real easy. Maybe it'll load, maybe it won't. Find out quickly. There it is. And there's our queryfeed.txt. And so now you can attach that right to your cluster, and you have all your feeds in one place. And so now as you're tuning these, you're able to push your feed. You can use the Carbon Black API to force an update, kind of like the modified update to the feed so that it syncs it. And then once it syncs your new feed, you'll have all your watch lists up to date across multiple clusters. Excellent. All right, so let me close this up here. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves. So next thing I'm going to showcase real quick is Forager. So Forager is a tool that Bob Argenbright built based on this similar need of needing intelligence in Carbon Black. And so in this case, it's another really simple one. This one is Python 3. So I'll just run it in Python 3 real quick so you can see the help. And so it has a nice ASCII art because everybody needs good ASCII art. And so Forager is really nice. You have also the ability to run a feed server straight out of Forager. So as you're generating all the intelligence feeds that this pulls down, which I'll show you, you can then also instantly pop up a feed server and host it, centrally again and push out your feeds to all these clusters. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to show you kind of what these different feeds look like. So I'm just going to run feeds list, and you can add all these feeds as well. If you have anything else that you're picking up open source wise, it's really easy to add them to Forager. So in this case, we have a lot of very basic ones that are very open. Anybody can find these out there. So I'm just going to pick a basic one, which is malware domains list, which is number 4. And literally in the background, it's going to go and download all the latest indicators for malware domains list. So now what I end up with is actually under our data directory here. So I'm just going to show you what that looks like. Type the right directory. You're under Intel and MDL IOC. And inside here is all the different indicators that compromised from today malware domain list. So now we have a nice little blob. But now the cool thing with Forager, and I'll just run that help again so you can see the different ones here. Couple things, right? You can hunt through those indicators. You want to see if there's an indicator from like recent Intel, was something dropped that you just want to validate on. You can add single IPs or receive a file, whatever it may be here. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to generate that feed. So this is the --cbgen. So cbgen will generate this as a carbon black feed, and I'm just going to say all. So I only have one malware domain list. Oh yeah, that's right, I already generated it. Let me show you what this looks like real quick. And JSON feeds. So this is now ready, prime time to be pushed out to your Carbon Black servers. Obviously, malware domain list is already on Carbon Black response, but in this case, if you had different type of intelligence you wanted to push, this is what it would look like. So now you're able to attach this. It's all JSON for the Carbon Black environment to pull in and begin correlating across your data. A really good example of using this is if you have like internal intelligence, you can generate this real quick with cbgen, any kind of internal information you collect or whatnot, or another Intel source. Generate that feed, pop it up, and then you're able to attach it to your Carbon Black servers. Cool. Any questions so far, Will?
None yet, no.
Awesome. All right, and for the last one here, we're gonna dig into a lot more data. So a couple utilities Red Canary produces. It's on our Red Canary code GitHub repository. Red Canary response utils. You can ask these tools. These tools were built out of questions we received from customers. So customers like Mike, I want to know every network connection that this endpoint made in the last couple days, 24 hours, the last 10 minutes, whatever it may be, right? I also want to know everything that happened on this endpoint. You know, we believe that a file was dropped, something bad happened. I want to know everything that happened step by step. So you can do this within Carbon Black, right? But now you're using the GUI, you're having to dig things, you're having to tag them, put them into the tagged items, and then dump the CSV and all that. So Red Canary built the utility, 2 utilities we're going to showcase. First one's going to be timeline.py. So timeline will generate a full timeline of events of what happened on this endpoint, say for the last 24 hours. It'll pull out all the netcons, reg mods, file mods, processes executed, everything that happened. It's so powerful. And it dumps it out in a nice CSV format. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to show you the help here real quick, and then I'll show you the demo example content I already pulled. So very similar, all the Red Canary utils are very similar in our help. We tried to make it to where you can search based on days, minutes, and a query. So if you want to say Python timeline, you can say query hostname Mike. You know, you could put my computer name, you could do username. You want to know all the user-based activity that's happened out there. And then you see this last one here. You only want to collect file mods. I want to know about someone who plugged a USB drive in and collected a bunch of file mods. All right, so I'm going to open this up. And we get a nice formatted CSV file. We got those endpoint names, username, got that process path. Actually, we open Survey up again. All right, more information. So here's your event type. Like I mentioned, proc, file mod, everything's here. You have your timestamps because you want to know when it happened. When did somebody bring something bad into my environment? When was it downloaded? There's your path, that parent process path. Here's that command line data. Now we know what they actually executed. And then over on the far right, you can start to see, right, there's your parent process, MD5, how many child processes respond, and then you get that link right to Carbon Black. You can see the other titles here, netcon domain, remote IP, all this information is pulled out with timeline, and then your file mod information as well. So, very, very powerful utility. We use this quite often when someone wants to know what's going on with this endpoint, or we need to know kind of everything that's happening. It's a great utility. Quickly spin it up and start gathering that data fast. So netcon util is very much the same. I'll run the help on that guy real quick. Is it in here? Network util. We keep changing the names of them. So network util has a little bit more features built in because it's looking for network data. You can get granular on the type of information you want to get. You can say hostname, username, direct right in there. You don't want to collect loopback or multicast. If you want to only see inbound data or outbound data, you could even specify TCP or UDP. This is really good if you're investigating like a web server that's been compromised, or if you want to just see across your servers what's been going inbound. A recent use case for this was with like WannaCry ransomware. You want to see who's traversing your network, sprawling across using all these different ports. So in this case, I ran 2 of them. I'll showcase both of these netcon util ones. And so this is a 1-day report on my computer on our demo environment. So it literally tells me, you know, you've been going to, you know, Google and Bing and whatnot, right? And you can see your port numbers, and you get that link right to Carbon Black. So you can go in there and investigate or download more information at that time. And the timestamp. Timestamp is very important in this data. So this is the 10-day report. There's gonna be a lot more information, more processes performing activity. When you're hunting through this information, obviously the key items you're looking for is PowerShell or any kind of, you know, odd process performing network connections, generally to direct IPs or a domain, whatever it may be. You know, really weird process names like enum executing out there. So there's all the ports, which is powerful here. So, any questions on any of these utilities? Anything I can answer?
So we got a question, what is the temporal resolution of timeline data and where is it set?
Temporal resolution. Any other extra data on that one?
It's events/sec reported, as you just submitted.
Yeah, I'm just not quite familiar with that term, Will.
Oh, no worries. So that was the question we had for the.
Okay.
He's saying I suspect he wants the resolution of the timestamps, like seconds and milliseconds.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's sort of the way it's formatted here in LibreOffice. Yeah. So you got your date 2017 11/14, and then yeah, I can't remember how it's broken out in here. Yeah, good question. I think I believe it comes out in UTC. So it could be, yeah, I can't convert it in my brain right here, but yeah. Hopefully it somewhat answered that question.
All right, that's the only question we had for that section, so I think we can move on to the next one.
Cool. Yeah, that's a little bit of the longer one here. So getting to a place where you're starting to operationalize your Carbon Black response environment. So in our case, a lot of what we ended up finding was that we had a lot of watch lists. We're generating a lot of them. We're trying to find lots of things. We wanted to do very broad searches very broad searches begin to impact Carbon Black because you start using wildcards, right? Multiple wildcards in our searches, and it just wasn't working out. But I think this was also just part of the maturity process of getting to a place where we started to take the event data off the Carbon Black event bus. We started to put it in Splunk. We were collecting netcon, process start data, all of our watch list feed hits, and any kind of binary information that we were able to get out of there. We put all this into Splunk, and then we were able to start to build out all of these different types of reports and save searches, which is really powerful when you start to combine these two types of things, right? So in our case, we already got our Splunk environment ready to go. As long as we got a network connection to 8,000. Nope, looks to be down. So you are using any SIM, the nice thing about, or any kind of log aggregation solution, everything that is within this Splunk app in particular. Sorry, trying to think as well. Anyway, so every save search that we put inside the Splunk app can be changed and added to like an ELK stack. We've even converted a lot of them to be utilized inside of our Sysmon app as well. So the Sysmon Splunk app is very similar to this one, and it's just a very powerful way to take this data, convert it to other platforms, or convert it to using other information within Splunk. So what I'm going to showcase here is the Carbon Black Response Splunk app. Back in the day, it was just an app that we had added all of our save searches to. Some of them were high fidelity enough to alert on, and I'll show you what I ended up doing in the new update for this app. We also just had a lot of broad searches. We were just looking for data, looking for behaviors happening in our environment. And that's very much the power of having one of these types of solutions in your organization. You're able to look for things in a very broad way and find out what's happening out there. So what I did, if you're not familiar with Splunk, I went into the Carbon Black Response Splunk app here. I clicked on the tab, the Splunk tab, and I went to reports. This report is all of the save searches that are built in here. And the latest update that I pushed here, I renamed all of our save searches to be easy for everybody to come in here, find out which ones are made for hunting. So you want to find binaries that are signed and executing in the environment. You want to find new binaries, and then I also set ones that were ready to be alerted on the moment you download this app. So what I mean is those are probably your more high fidelity ones. And the nice part is you could open this up and search. You'll be able to see what we had codified right in here as the Splunk query, and you can then tune it for your environment because it's going to run. So my demo environment doesn't have a ton of information, but we'll run it anyway. So in this case, if you haven't used our Carbon Black Response Splunk app, we have a macro right here. That's what those little brackets are. So CB, the macro, we're looking for the process bits admin, and then we're looking for command line transfer download within the command line data. The demo environment doesn't have it, so it's probably good to say that you could alert on this day 0. And so what I do for all of my alert save searches, and I have a pretty standard table that I put in here. You can modify this however you like. So what I'm saying is I want to have the computer name, username, the command line data, a link back to that inside of Splunk, and the timestamp that Splunk had for it. Generally, when we were using Splunk, we tried to set everything to run every hour or so, and we tried to stagger them as best as possible. And you kind of caught a quick glimpse here about how many reports that we had saved inside of Splunk. I've added a lot to it as well for this recent update. So there's a lot of information, a lot of things you can look at, a lot of behaviors, a lot of different hunting ones in here. And again, you can go get the app, it's free, and open these up, and you're able to see all these save searches. Like right here, PS exec hunt usage. It's literally just looking for PS exec usage within your organization. QW Insta, that's another really good one too. Looking for people using QW Insta to query across endpoints, trying to collect usernames of people logged in. So just looking for QW Insta. The standard method I use for reporting this out is just stats values command line by computers. And I'll show you real quick a little bit of what that looks like. Apparently I have more scheduled tasks in my demo environment. Maybe not. Boy, we're really boring in our demo environment. All right, so what I ended up doing was just breaking this out here, showing me all processes, specifically just the command line by computer name. And this is a really cool way to identify some interesting behaviors happening in your environment. As a saved search, this is something you could run daily. It may not be something, according to the hunting maturity model, that is considered, to be more mature. It's very ad hoc. You're now just coming in here and you're hunting through lots and lots of data, trying to look for suspicious behaviors. You can kind of tell right off the bat that this one box is doing a lot of weird things, a lot of net shell activity. There's all those scheduled tasks I couldn't find. Weird behaviors everywhere. So now, one of the things we also added to this was with Splunk, you get the adaptive response framework, and you have the ability to automate some basic alerting or some basic carbon black live response functions straight from Splunk here. And so like you can come in here and look at a specific event, being that's a mod load, it's not gonna be the best example here. But you do have the ability, and it comes with the app, to set up your alerts to actually perform actions on an endpoint. So I'll just open up the alert piece here real quick, and you can go to add actions. And so you have the ability to ban MD5s, isolate the endpoint, or kill that process. And so in this case, if you have a really tight rule for banning MD5s, like say your virus total integration, you set it to like 30, every time something over 30 is bad, go ahead and just ban it straight from Splunk. If you have a really good high fidelity feed hit or watch list, or not, yeah, feed hit or a watch list, or one of your reports is solid, again, you can set that to just isolate the endpoint every time this feed hits. So, really powerful tool, and definitely looking for more feedback and things that we can add in here over time as well. Any questions on this lab here?
Nothing just yet, no. Oh, here's one that came in. Is there a vulnerability to these scripts, and can these app scripts be attack themselves?
Good question. I will say, I mean, everything is not perfect, right? Definitely pull them down and test them in your environment. Look at them. The code's all on GitHub for review. If you have any questions, feel free to ping Red Canary or even Carbon Black Dev Relations team. Both of us have very solid teams who've built these tools. We all use these utilities. But yeah, absolutely. If you'd like to test them or go a little deeper on them, happy to hop on another call and do that as well.
Another question just came in. What advantage do you find in alerting through Splunk?
Just centralization. Focus was just getting everything out of here, getting everything out of 10 consoles, putting it in one place, and just having the ability to see what's going on across all those 10 products. You might find, right, using the triage alerts page is good. What may happen at times, which we ran into, was we accidentally alerted on something super broad. Show me all PowerShell. And triage alerts blows up to 90,000 alerts, right? And then you're quickly, disabling it and calling CV support for the query to clear out Postgres real quick. So it just depends. If you got really tight, high fidelity alerts, triage alerts might be perfect in Carbon Black response. But as you kind of get to a place where you need to be able to do more at scale type hunting across a large set of data, across multiple products as well, centralizing really helps and becomes highly effective.
All right, another question. What is the difference between having the saved searches and having it in Carbon Black watch lists?
Yep, great question. So yeah, you could absolutely come in here, take out the more high fidelity ones and add those to Carbon Black response. Fortunately, over time, the community has really provided a lot of these same ones. So really what you would end up doing in Splunk is just using the more hunt ones to look for different behavior of bits admin or different behavior that's happening out there. So looking at it real quick, kind of like how I showed that command line by computer name, similar type thing. Show me psexec command line by computer name. You could even say, show me a count of psexec, right? By every endpoint in my environment. And if it's over 5, it's a little suspect because my logon script only runs at 1 time. Why is it running 10 times in my finance department on 1 machine?
All right, and one more question here. Is there a reason we shouldn't forward carbon black logs directly to Splunk?
Reason to or to not? Sorry.
Not to.
Oh, no, I highly recommend it. Part of our Splunk and operationalizing Splunk with Carbon Black Response blog series was focused on getting data into Splunk. And I mean, if it's any SIM, right? I mean, if you have any other product as well, I highly recommend doing it. If you don't end up putting process and netcon data into Splunk, getting your watch list feeds and the binary telemetry inside of your SIM is still very, very powerful. You're able to see things a little bit differently. You're also able to just kind of, if you have a way to perform like adaptive responses to things, you can still do it off of watch lists and feeds. There's actually some particular queries we have within those safe searches that are based on risk. And so it actually uses some very simple eval statements in Splunk to determine risk on endpoints based on watch list and feed hits. So if you download free version of Splunk, you dump your watch list and feed hits in there, you still get a lot of value out of it.
All right, that's the last question we had come in for that lab.
Excellent, excellent. Some quick resources here. We have our threat hunting page at redcanary.com/threat hunting. And then we also have some additional carbon black resources at redcanary.com as well. Again, you can reach me on Twitter, m_Haggis. You can also shoot us an email or shoot me an email direct, mike@redcanary.com, if you have any questions or would like to dig into these things a little bit deeper.
All right, and if you guys have any additional questions for Mike, please take the time now to submit them. We have a little time for a broader Q&A following the labs. Mike, one question we have is, what are the biggest challenges you encounter when threat hunting at scale?
The large set of data can become very cumbersome. And sometimes if you're looking at things very broadly for a long period of time, you'll end up very much just kind of almost like narrow-minded, and you start to forget what exactly you're looking for, which is why I believe those hunting maturity models began to become a thing, right? Organizations were just doing very much ad hoc pieces to all of this. But now we're starting to codify exactly how we want to perform these things. So you can begin to focus on how you want to do it with intelligence, how you want to do it based on, a tip from Twitter, or just of interest, but focused interest. Because not all of us have all day to focus on looking for the next big thing, right? We're paying analysts to do a particular job, but that job isn't all day to focus on looking at process data all day from every single endpoint across 70,000, right? It's a lot of time and money. Hopefully that answers the question.
All right, another question we have. I saw recent data from you along the lines of the MITRE attack framework. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So here at Red Canary, we're working to add the MITRE attack framework to all of our detectors. So our detector set will have that a tag for each part of the framework, technique and tactic. And then on top of that, Red Canary recently released a project called Atomic Red Team. So the Atomic Red Team is it's a framework for you to test your detection capabilities, which goes along very well with what we were talking about here today. So you want to validate whether those safe searches work in Splunk, or you want to validate you have a watch list built in Carbon Black Response. You could run different parts of the atomic test framework and validate your dose detection and prevention capabilities. So all very powerful.
All right, one last question we have here is, what are some other use cases for using CB Live Response?
Great question. So Carbon Black Live Response, we have a lot of power with it, right? And so we see a lot of people, a lot of customers are beginning to use different, like either kicking off your AV tool through live response calls. So you can say, you know, run a quick full AV scan. We have some customers who are actually putting files in the file system with live response and then executing it. So like a junk removal tool, or even like a Malwarebytes command line, things like that, right? To just help. Forensically, we see a lot of, we've had one customer work to bring in Kanza, which is a PowerShell forensics toolkit, drop Kanza on the file system and begin executing things and collecting those artifacts and bringing it back all through live response. And as we start to move on, and it's been happening for about a year with the automation orchestration part of the industry, we're starting to see a lot more stuff happen with live response, because people are realizing that it's not just about killing a process. You can now do something, perform another function on that endpoint, pull files down, pull things back that you need to analyze, right? That's all just part of the power of that product, which is great.
All right, great, thank you. So it looks like that was our last question. So we can wrap up here. I know a lot of people have asked whether or not the webinar is being recorded. It is, and it will be made available on carbonblack.com in the resources section within a day or two of today. Mike, I want to thank you for the great presentation. It was very engaging, so much appreciated for that. And if you guys have any additional questions, feel free to reach out to the Carbon Black or the Red Canary teams via the website. Both websites will have contact forms on it. So thank you so much for joining us today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.